Path of Exile 2 is filled with what are commonly known as spender generator skills. The idea is that a skill is either a spender or a generator. The generators are used to give your character certain temporary status effects like buffs or charges, and then the spender skills consume those status effects for a powerful payoff. The idea is that this makes combat more meaningful and interactive by rewarding players who use a variety of skills rather than spamming the same skill over and over again. And although that sounds very nice in theory, the reality is that the way that the game enforces these interactions is kind of underwhelming. Generator skills are usually awkward, hard to activate, or have hard capped cooldowns on how often you can actually use them, and spender skills just aren't really good enough in their default unempowered form. Not to mention that arguably, people don't actually want to play this way. When you've grinded a game for hundreds of hours, interactive gameplay isn't what you're looking for, it's just relaxed blasting and hunting for loot. But what if there was a loophole? A way of generating charges with the same skill that spends them, and enough to support full uptime on your empowered skills. Say hello to Lightning Spear Tactician, the build that unleashes the true power of Lightning Spear with permanent uptime frenzy charges. The build has two key components. First, aside from a couple of important caveats which we'll get to later, the build is able to generate frenzy charges on hit and keep empowering itself. If we then also combine this with Fork, it creates a super satisfying explosive effect on the screen. But of course, triple of 0 is still 0. We need to get some damage into that spear if the build is actually going to do anything. And this is where the second part of the build comes in, which is the auras. Spear's one of the few weapons that can be used with a scepter in the offhand, which by default provides large amounts of spirit. But on top of that, the Tactician's Ascendancy halves the spirit cost of all auras, which is effectively quadruple the amount of auras that a typical build can sustain. This build stacks so many auras that we literally need 2 extra unset rings for the skill slots to fit them all. Those auras are the invisible engine powering the damage and defenses for the build, together providing a whopping 150% more damage, 25% more critical hit chance, and 40% increased skill speed. The result is a super powerful and super fun endgame blaster that can make even the most difficult content look easy. But of course, no build is perfect, and I'll get into what I see as the upsides and downsides a little bit later. For now, let's get into the detail of how the build works. First off, let's talk about generating frenzy charges. This comes from 3 mechanics working together in harmony: pin, armour break, and the resonance keystone. Pin comes from the Tactician's right where we want the ascendancy notable. This is kind of part of the core package for Tactician. It's on its own a very strong effect into mobilising everything around you, makes you much tankier and makes the game easier to play. Next, we take eroding change. And this is the secret sauce that really unlocks the whole build. The reason this node is so powerful is because it calculates its armor break before the adjustments for normal, magic, rare, and unique enemies. That means for normal enemies, since they take double armor break, every time we pin them, we fully break their armor, and that opens up all of the different armor break payoff mechanics. The armor break 3 support gem in particular allows you to use this to generate endurance charges. All we need to do then is allocate resonance, and we have our frenzy charge generation in place. Generating these frenzy charges isn't guaranteed, since the armor break 3 support only gives a 20% chance to give a charge on armor break. That amounts to 1 charge per 5 normal enemies pinned. But what's nice about Lightning Spear as the spender skill is that the empowered version splits, hitting triple as many enemies as it usually would. So you create this kind of looping effect where, so long as there are enough dudes in your map, an empowered Lightning Spear will split so much and hit so many enemies that it's almost guaranteed to give you back at least 1 more charge for the next one. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, let's now get into the skill tree, the items, and the skills on my build now. Obviously, you can do this however you want, but this is just how I've done it. So if we have a look at the skill tree, the way that I've set up the skill tree is kind of the most efficient pathing possible between these ranger nodes down here and then the various crit clusters that are really, really important to get on any crit build. And what's convenient about this crit cluster at the top is that it's right next to resonance, so only 2 points to get resonance there. But there's lots of good stuff on the way. In particular, we've got jewel sockets here, giving us lots of good jewels, and then we've also got various defenses. We've got movement, this big movement speed cluster here, which is fantastic. More movement speed over here. And for our weapon set 2, I've got single target damage, so I'm taking these damage nodes here, shock effect, damage when nearby, and so on and so forth. And we're also picking up some defensive nodes as well, so Bestial Skin, fantastic defensive node, and of course Spectral Ward, another fantastic defensive node. Jewels that I've got in here, I have one standard jewel, or two standard jewels I should say, one of those which is giving me some mana recovery. Then I've got my From Nothing, which is around Dance with Death, to give me access to these very good spear nodes and skill speed, as well as a bit of evasion. And then I have my Megalomaniac, which is anointing my eroding chains. Very, very helpful, means I don't have to travel over there. And then the Cunning Fox, which was a little plus, gives me a bit of extra quality, especially for my Berserk and my Trinity, which definitely helps. And on my amulet, I've then anointed the Frenzied Bear, which is just a big steroid every time I consume a Frenzy Charge, which is always very convenient. Next up, let's have a look at the items. There's not actually that much to say here. I'm using very standard attack damage items, similar items you'll see on any Lightning Spear build, whether that be Amazon or Ritualist or whatever it is. The only difference is really that on my spear, which is a Fizz DPS spear, I've taken this Soul Core of Endurance, which gives me an extra Frenzy Charge when I get a Frenzy Charge, or 50% chance to do that. This is an Endurance Soul Core. It's working on Frenzy Charges. That has something to do with Resonance, something to do with Spaghetti Code. I'm not entirely sure why, but having tested this, it does work. So that's the Soul Core that you want to be taking. On my rings, of course, as I've mentioned, I have to take 2 unset rings to make this whole setup work. So I have those 2 unset rings. I'm just doing damage to attacks. But on this ring in particular, there is a desecrated mod that you can force with an Omen, which gives you magnitude of shock if you've consumed a Frenzy Charge recently. And that's actually a very, very good mod for us. So on the amulet, usually you'd see these amulets aiming for having tier 1 spirit on the prefixes, but we have so much spirit we don't need anymore, and so we don't need any spirit from gear, which is really helpful. It meant that I could pick up this amulet fairly cheaply, presumably because someone had rolled over spirit and was a bit disappointed that their craft failed. And then I redid the prefixes a little bit, ended up with something like this. The gloves are pretty standard attack gloves, and with critical damage bonus, effective socketed items, attack speed, all the usual good stuff. And then the helmet and the boots are standard kind of energy shield helmet and energy shield boots, with a little bit of maximum rage on there, and a little bit of life regeneration on there as well. It's worth calling out because these spirit support gems that give you life regen, if you have as much rage as I do, you're not going to get there in terms of life regen. So you need a little bit of extra help from your modifiers on your gear. So now looking at my skill gem setup, this is all pretty standard stuff. A couple of things that I would call out. Firstly, since we're using a Sacred Flame, we can get this Purity of Fire for free. And what that also means is that if you socket spirit support gems into this Purity of Fire, these gems don't cost any extra. So even though they say additional reservations, extra spirit, they don't cost anything extra if you put them in that Purity of Fire. Then on our Lightning Spear, I've got some standard Pinpoint Critical, Elemental Ornament, Overextend, Fork, and Armor Break 2. These two we've already discussed them, but losing those 2 support gems hasn't really done much. I've still got plenty of damage. And if we have a look at this damage, as you can see, I've got a fairly, almost exactly equal split between fire and lightning damage on this, which is really supporting my Trinity there. The third part of the Trinity obviously being the Herald of Thunder with Embitter, and if I take a look at that, that's very heavily weighted towards cold damage. For the single target, as I said, I'm using Explosive Spear, and that I've put my Lineage support gems on because I wanted to give that the best possible chance of success. And although we can't use Frenzy Charges on this Explosive Spear, it's very, very difficult to generate Frenzy Charges on single target on this build. I do get my Trinity stacked, and the way that I get my Trinity stacked is by using the Storm Lance. The Storm Lance has a Lodge Spear version when you throw it, and that kind of zaps constantly, it fires a bolt every so often. So I've got a couple of those being thrown down with multi-shot, and then by using Embitter on this gem, The lodge spear damage is kind of split fairly equally between cold and lightning. Slightly weighted towards lightning. I could do with a bit of extra cold damage here. But nevertheless, the ranges here are wide enough that the zaps are going to be giving you enough of what you need to get Trinity set up. So, and you'll see this later, but the setup is throw Storm Lance, have it zap a bit, get your cold and lightning resonance from Trinity, throw your explosive spears, and then by the time everything blows up, you're going to have a full stacked Trinity. Okay, so now going into a bit of a map demonstration. I've got a pretty standard tier 15 map here with some extra elemental resistances on monsters, as well as a deli, an overrun map, and a regular precursor tablet, and I put some extra effectiveness on those other tablets as well, just to make the map a little bit more challenging. In terms of upsides and downsides on the build, I say the first main upside is that it is just super fun to play. This is a literally one button build. I'm clearing all of this content with just my lightning spear. And as you can see, that has got a fantastic clear. I've got good move speed. I've got good defenses. I'm feeling very, very comfortable going around this map. Next up, in terms of upsides, because this build uses so few unique items, it means that it can scale really, really hard. Any build that uses lots of unique items, especially in key slots like weapon, gloves, rings, they're going to be missing out on opportunities to get more damage and more scaling from those rare items. And as we know, rare items are just much more powerful than unique items in this game when it comes to scaling. That leads us on to the first downside, which I would say is that the build is just scaling. Now, there's nothing in the build that gives you more damage. You get more projectiles, you get more skill speed, you get all of the mores. But as we said earlier in the video, more of 0 is still 0. You need to get damage into your gear for this to feel good. And unfortunately, because the gear is very generic gear, that also makes it quite expensive. It's quite in high demand, especially the spear, a high physical DPS spear with crit chance, attack speed, and level of all attack skills. Those are quite expensive. And then the second downside of the build that I would mention is that it's not really spec'd around single target. We have a single target solution, and it works really, really well for most of the content in the game. All of the mapping bosses, such as the Breach boss, the Expedition boss, Etsiri, all of the rest of that all dies incredibly quickly. But this isn't a late game Uber Arbiter one-shot build. That's just not what it's designed to do. It's a mapper. It's designed to have fun running around in maps. So that's what you should be doing with it. So with all that having been said, let's fast forward over to this boss. As a reminder, this boss has all of the effectiveness, the deli, and all map boss nodes taken. The setup for bosses is to throw 2 Storm Lances. Those are going to be zapping and hopefully stacking up the Trinity, and 4 explosive spears, and that gives you this double detonation. And after all of that, the Trinity stacked up pretty well. We have about 250 resonance, as well as the boss being shocked and also exposured. So that's about it for the mapping. Let's go and do some Breach. Better than coin, couldn't agree more. Who needs real money when you can have e-coins? Alright, so swipped over to weapon set 2. I've obviously got no Trinity stacks. Oh, there's Xesht. Gonna go for our Storm Lancers first. That was one too many. And then we watch what happens. It's okay. Usually you can, sometimes you get lucky on the Garricans, you can kill him in one shot. That was pretty good. Did about, what, 8 to 10 million in one pop there. So yeah, that's kind of how the single target looks. And it's been working really well. No lucky drops this time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this build overview. If you want more details, or you want to learn how to set up the skill tree or the gems or anything like that, you can go to my detailed build guide on Mobalytics, where you can get all of the additional info. And of course, I'm always happy to answer questions here or on Discord or whatever your preferred channel is. Otherwise, just hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.